Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to From Akron and Beyond. I'm here with Nick, and how are you doing, Nick?
Real good. School's in session here. The parking lot's full outside.
Yes. It was quite joyous, our reception when we came. Actually, there was no reception at all. But no, except who are these old weirdos? And
where are they hanging around the school?
Call security, right? Well, anyway, our episode today could not fit the title better. It is a gentleman who is most definitely from Akron, and he has gone beyond with his work, but he still seems to come back to Akron from time to time, and he's a good guy and a good friend and an interesting person, and that is Ronald Koltnow. Hi, Ron.
Hi, Bob. Hi, Nick.
Hey,
good
buddy.
to see you again.
So glad to see you, man.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Old home week.
Yeah. Now, before we begin with going into more detailed stuff, Nick and you go way back, apparently. And Nick was telling me about you guys hanging out around University of Akron or something. Is that right?
Yeah, the Hilltop. I don't know if it still exists. No, the old center's gone, right?
I don't recognize that area at all. My brother and I walked down there recently, and I couldn't even find where West Hall had been, which is, as you may well know, where they had exiled the English department.
I remember the old Gardner Student Center, like, was two levels. The lower level, the Checkeries, where all the fraternity guys hung out at. And then the rest of us, we had the upstairs with the Hilltop.
The Hilltop for creatives.
Yeah.
At the Student Center, back when I was at the University of Akron, I was talking about it with an old friend of mine about this recently. They had a Scientology recruiting thing there. Did you guys?
No.
Did that happen when you were there?
No.
Yeah. It was kind of like one of those things where, it seemed very innocuous. It was like, do you want to learn more about Scientology? And, they'd hand you a pamphlet or whatever. And then there was a meeting at a certain time, in the afternoon or whatever. I never went, but it's just kind of interesting in retrospect.
Wow.
With all the stuff that particular whatever
we never went clear.
Religion or whatever, we never went clear. Yeah, right.
Well, when I return from Collab, I might attend one of those sessions.
Okay.
I was about to say, going back to the Hilltop, one of my favorite literary events happened at the Hilltop. The English department faculty were having lunch there, and the great Mary Alice DeHaven was standing in line, and she said loudly, "Oh, if I don't get something to eat soon, I'm going to faint." And Thomas Wolfe scholar John Phillipson was right beside her. He said, "Go ahead and faint, Mary. I love catching fallen women."
I had Phillipson for a class. Yeah, he was a funny guy.
He had such a dry wit. I met so many true eccentrics in that English department. It's forever a part of my heart and soul.
I just have to add this. We won't get too far off track here, but Phillipson, Dr. Phillipson, he was indeed a well-known scholar of the writer Thomas Wolfe, and nothing seemed to bug him more than people who loved Jack Kerouac, because he was always like, that would just set him off. He was like, Kerouac was a second or third rate Thomas Wolfe. All of his innovations were from Thomas Wolfe. He did it first. And it just almost, you get red in the face. It always cracked me up.
I don't want to pick a fight with hipsters everywhere, but when it comes to Kerouac, I am Phillipsonian.
Well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Those are good times at the Hilltop, you know?
My memory is of food. I don't know. Everything, I guess, in my life circles around food.
Well, the cafeteria style stuff sucked, but the conversation was great.
I know they used to sell like a gigantic sub sandwich. It was like several feet long, and you would buy it by the inch.
Oh, okay.
Oh, I remember that now.
It sounds good.
Actually, they were good.
Yeah. Okay, Ron. So you were born in Akron?
Yes. I spent the first 10 years of my life on Balt Street.
Oh.
I guess you would call that West Hill. And then we moved way on uptown
Okay.
to Wallhaven area,
Okay.
where I was a stone's throw away from Swenson's, which made it my happy place.
Okay. And where'd you go to high school?
I went to high school at Firestone.
Okay.
In fact, I was named by the graduating class of 1970 at Firestone the person least likely to be remembered by anybody else in the graduating class.
Quite the reward there. Award for
I
you.
was a nerd. I was a nerd then. After many years of traveling around and reading and experiencing new things, I'm still kind of a nerd.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's good. Nerds are good. We need them. Don't you agree, Nick?
Yeah.
I was about to say they had a sign out front that said, "Welcome Scholars." I was about to say, how'd they know I was going to be here?
So you were an English major?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Actually, believe it or not, I had a minor in Russian.
No.
Oh, really? Okay.
Я говорю по-русски очень плохо. I speak Russian very poorly.
Well, that comes in handy occasionally.
Well, it does, specifically when you're watching spy movies, and you can tell which of the actors actually know Russian.
So after school, then, you go to college, and you were always going to pursue a literary career?
My dream in life, my wild fantasy, my deepest, darkest dream was to work at some mid-level university teaching English to the board in my tweedy jacket with leather patches on the elbows.
You had the wardrobe picked out anyway. Yeah.
Didn't have the money to buy the wardrobe, but I had it picked out. But, like all people in English departments, we all had the great American novel lurking deep within us.
Yeah.
And it's lurking. It
Continues
lurks
to
still.
lurk. Yeah. Now, I know that you ultimately ended up in the book trade.
Oh,
correct?
yes.
And how did that happen that you ended up working for publishing? And what did you do exactly?
It's absolute serendipity. The truth of the matter is, University of Akron's slogan was, you can get there from the University of Akron.
Yeah.
Well, in fact, I went to the university by working my way at B. Dalton.
Oh, okay.
Working at B. Dalton,
At Summit Mall?
At Summit Mall. No, wait a minute. The B. Dalton store I worked in was Rolling Acres.
Oh, okay.
Why am I? I've got my malls confused. I did work at Summit Mall, but not then. So anyway, I got to like the book business a great deal. I got to understand a little bit of the ins and outs of book marketing and just sharing the joy when something you love takes off.
Mm-hmm.
So I left Akron in 1982 to move to Washington, D.C., where I thought for sure I'd get some high-level government job. Instead, I ended up working at yet another B. Dalton while I was looking for a real job. I was telling Nick this earlier, that the regional manager of B. Dalton came to the store. The store got a negative review. I seem to have gotten 2 thumbs up because she and I soon moved in together.
Yeah.
And after being together for about 2 years, she suggested that I become a traveling book rep. And whether she wanted me to go away or whether she wanted me to get a job I loved, I wasn't certain. So I took a job with Putnam Publishing Group as a traveling sales rep throughout upstate New York. I was actually hired to replace the woman who people can't see to my right, who is now my wife.
Okay.
She had the job before me. I replaced her. And it's a job.
Barbara Trainer.
Yeah, Barbara
by the
Trainer
way,
is
who
my wife.
Yes, she's our audience today.
Yeah.
It's a job few people know actually even exists.
Yeah, tell us.
Your job consists of reading a whole lot of books and going to meetings where you talk about how to sell the books. Then you spend
So these are books that have already been accepted for publication?
Yeah, already accepted for publication, but long before their actual publication dates. So what you do is you drive around to bookstores all over your territory, taking orders and drumming up enthusiasm for what's coming down the pike. And at the time, my territory ranged from West Virginia to western Vermont.
Okay.
So I basically lived on the road.
So that's still when there were a number of mom and pop shops.
Yes, only independents.
Gotcha.
To be quite honest, there weren't that many chains back then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
When I started, there was basically B. Dalton and Walden.
Right.
B. Dalton, of course, was subsumed into the Barnes & Noble empire. So B&N was the big titan then, long before Amazon. But it was mostly independent stores.
Wow. That's why you approach it that way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, wow.
These are the people who are book lovers. You know, they could have gotten a real job. I remember Devo did a video, and I think it was in the Barrel Room, and the narrator says, artistic people are just smart girls and guys who couldn't get a real job. These are people who could get a real job, but just decided to sell books instead because they love them so much.
Yeah.
And, my life's always been tied up around books,
Mm-hmm.
something I will always thank my father for, because he was not only a good reader himself, but he made sure we went to the library every week.
Uh-huh.
He was a good man. That's a good thing, good lesson to learn for sure. I just have to mention offhandedly here, or slightly, well, it's totally on topic. There's a recent article in the New Yorker. Why are there bookstores? I don't know if you've seen this one or not.
I saw it. I didn't read it.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. They actually talk about B. Dalton in it. Of course, I know why there's bookstores, because I exist. I love bookstores.
Yeah. Well, there's the E market, and of course there's the nine-headed hydra from the West, whose name shall not be uttered. But people have gotten into the ease and convenience of pushing a button online and having the book of your choice showing up 1 or 2 days later. It's a great service, really. But for people who don't know what they want,
right?
I mean, let's say the Robin Hitchcock memoir came out.
Oh, I just got that.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah.
It's slight, but good.
Yeah.
But I knew it was there. I could have gone online and pushed a button and had it delivered to my house easily. But I prefer shopping at independent bookstores. Mm-hmm. But the bookstore exists really for the people who don't know what they want.
Right.
What if I had been at the bookstore and glanced and saw 1967 by Robin Hitchcock? I would have grabbed it on the spot.
Mm-hmm.
That's why bookstores exist.
Yeah.
It's spontaneous, it's gut level, it's emotion, seduction, if I dare say such a thing.
Yeah, sure.
It's like you hear the expression, the kid in the candy shop. All book lovers know that feeling.
Yeah.
They know it any time they go into a library or a bookstore.
It's very similar to record stores that way. You go maybe looking for one thing, and then you just browse, and it's like, wow, this looks interesting, and I've never heard of this band or never heard of this writer. I wonder what she's like. And then, you take a chance, and then suddenly you have a new favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, friends of mine did that once. They got me a record called Ernest V. Stoneman and his Dixie Mountaineers. They said, this is up Ron's alley. And it was sort of hillbilly vaudeville from the early 30s.
Oh.
And
boy, they hit the nail on the head. I loved that record.
Well, speaking of music, now we've established how you and Nick know one another, although exactly what you both were doing at the student center at the same time, I'm not sure. It just happened to
that was,
I guess.
That was, our Haight-Ashbury.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Between classes.
I was about to say, I must admit that I know Nick from Akron U, not really from the Bizarros.
Right, right. But now, to be frank with you, Nick and I were talking about this, Ron, knowing that we were having you on, and I said, Ron's a great guy. I consider him a good friend. But then I'm like, I don't really know how I know you. We have a lot of mutual acquaintances and friends.
That was it. I think it was Mikey Baker.
Okay. Mike Baker, okay.
You were living with Michael at a time.
Yeah, we lived together for about 7 years.
No, man.
Were you with him there on Portage Path?
No, we lived on Mull Avenue.
Okay.
right off of Market Street. There's that big apartment building, and then there was a duplex there. We lived there. Yeah,
but
that's what my band Unit 5 rehearsed as well.
Yeah, it had to have been either through Harvey or Harvey Gold, that is, or Michael Baker.
It's probably Baker. Yeah.
Yeah, but I remember seeing your name a lot on Facebook, and I kept on saying,
bathroom stalls.
Yeah, right.
I remember saying, I know this guy, but who is he? And I think we got together at the library.
Okay.
Because I wanted to pop in and see you face to face to refresh any memories that never seemed to have shown up.
Did you go to shows at the bank and stuff then?
Only Tin Huey.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes Chai Pig.
I remember seeing you there.
Yeah. I was a Tin Huey groupie. It's Harvey Gold's long, luxurious locks that did it. Actually, I went to school with every member of Tin Huey, except for Chris Butler. Mm-hmm. I knew Harvey from Perkins and Michael Alward, Stuart Austin from Firestone. And I knew Ralph because I'm friends with his brother Jim. Jim and I were in the same Boy Scout troop back in the 60s.
Okay.
By the way, if anybody's listening today, we're recording this on Jim Carney's birthday. And he is the very heart and soul of Akron. We love that guy.
Yes. He's a good man.
Tremendous guy.
Yeah. When I first met Ralph Carney, and people who know him only as a sort of jazz man and a sax man might be intrigued to know that when I met him, he was 13, and his instrument of choice was either mandolin or banjo. Mm-hmm. But he was one of those great gifted individuals who could pick up any musical instrument and learned how to play it, I think, within minutes.
Right.
The world lost a great deal when Ralph died.
Oh, absolutely.
Yes. No, that is a definite for sure. So now in your role of traveling book guy, right? Are you meeting a lot of authors as part of this?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
I am known in some circles as the world's worst name dropper.
Well, drop some names for us. Feel free.
Barack Obama.
Oh, that's a good one. Who again? No, I'm sorry.
Yeah, at the time, he was the junior senator from Illinois.
Okay.
Yeah, I always win those. Who's the most famous person you've ever met? I've met 3 U.S. presidents and been to a cocktail party with a 4th who shall remain nameless.
Okay.
Many of my friends today are still authors I worked with. Mm-hmm. Mostly mystery authors, because that's my favorite genre. Mm-hmm. You want me to drop some big names?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, sure.
I was at a party with Ralph Ellison. I've kissed Maya Angelou. Had an argument with Norman Mailer, which is easy to do, by the way. I was in a heated discussion.
That sounds so special that you had an argument with Norman Mailer.
I was in a heated argument with journalist Gay Talese, and I walked away from it. We both agreed to disagree and left on friendly terms. When I walked away, somebody asked me, what were you two guys fighting about? Well, the truth of the matter is, in his book, Thy Brother's Wife, he talks a little bit about pinup models. Mm-hmm. And he still contends that Diane Weber was the world's greatest pinup model. And I was arguing in favor of Betty Page. Uh-huh. Neither one of us would yield.
Wow.
I had since gone back and looked at pictures of Diane Weber, and I must admit Gay was onto something there.
Beautiful.
You owe him a retraction, it sounds like.
I believe he's dead now. I'm sorry.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. I knew his widow, too. Maybe I should write to her.
I'm sure she'd appreciate that particular message. Well, this is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with my co-host Nick Nicholas, and we are talking with book salesman / author himself, Ron Koltnow. Ron, before we get into your writing,
yes,
I did want to ask, since we've gone down a musical path a little bit, you mentioned Tin Huey and this strange bluegrass vaudeville band that you like. What other, like when you were younger or whatever, what other music, what music were you really kind of hit you as a younger guy, like kind of like influenced you a bit? Inspired you?
Well, I can tell you that the first single I ever bought in my life was Bob Dylan's Like a Rolling Stone.
That's a good one.
Well, I figured.
Yeah.
But, my tastes were really not that different from any other kid at the time. I listened to a lot of the Beatles.
Yeah.
I was into the Beach Boys in the beginning. I'll come back to them later. But it was Beatles and British Invasion stuff.
Yeah.
And then one day I heard the Beau Brummels, who became my favorite British band, and I was heartbroken to find out years later that they were from California, not English at all.
They looked English.
Yeah, but then in my formative years, late 60s, I was highly influenced by WAUP, the Akron U radio station.
Okay.
Jim Carney was a disc jockey there. But my friend Brian Goodell was a disc jockey who played a little bit more progressive stuff. And Brian had a pretty big impact on my musical tastes. I began to listen more and more to the sort of artsy British stuff, Traffic, Family. I think might have been 1967, the summer of 1967, could have been 68, that Brian played the intro and the outro by the Bonzo Dog Band.
Oh, wow.
And to this day, I've been a fan. In fact, I submitted a book proposal to write a book, actually, for that 33 and a third label.
Yeah, right.
The Cover Records album.
Yeah.
Record albums. Well, I wanted to do a book on Gorilla, which was the Bonzo Dog Band's debut album.
Yeah.
And nobody there had ever heard of the band. They didn't think it would sell. I contend they would sell. Then on the other hand, too, that my approach may have been a little bit too pedantic for them, because it involved all kinds of things like British Music Hall.
But you'd have to if you're writing about them, right? I mean, that was their whole...
British Music Hall crossed with surrealist artists, or actually, to be more specific, Dadaists.
Yeah.
So I guess starting about 1969, I went pure Dada, Mothers of Invention, Captain Beefheart, the usual path for the young wastrel.
Yeah.
These days, though, I have to admit, I don't listen to music much anymore. I listen to classical and jazz.
Yeah.
When I'm writing, I listen to only classical. When I'm sitting at my desk avoiding writing, which, by the way, is roughly 87 to 89% of the time, I listen to jazz. The only current living musician whose music I buy anymore is Robin Hitchcock.
Wow, yeah.
And even then, I don't think his stuff is quite as good as the Soft Boys days. I came to them late. Came to the Soft Boys after I moved to D.C.
Underwater Moonlight, man.
That is a brilliant album. In the D.C. area, there was a great radio station called, I think it was WHFS. And they had a disc jockey called Weasel. And Weasel, very near and dear to my heart, would have nicknames for all of his acts. Los Lobos were those real-life Chicanos from East L.A. And Neil Young was Whiny Neil. But he introduced me to T-Bone Burnett.
Oh, okay.
And been a lifelong fan. For a time, I thought I'd collect every album T-Bone Burnett produced, but nobody has that much money.
Yeah, there's quite a few, yeah.
Talking about Hitchcock albums, boy, it's like that wide.
Yeah. There's a new one coming, that ties into the book.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
his covers of 60s songs.
Absolutely. I'm waiting for that.
We've had a number of people on the show that happen to be Robin Hitchcock fans. The name has come up more than a couple times. It's interesting that he has a cult here in Akron, apparently.
He claims to be the heir to Syd Barrett. And I know some of my art rock friends, who shall remain nameless, are more heavily into Syd Barrett than I ever was. But I have to add that Madcap Laughs is one of my favorite songs of all time.
Okay, now we're going to go slightly off track here for a second, but you're going to be a good person to ask this question of. You've read all of Hitchcock's memoir?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, as you say.
Well, all of it, it took me the better part of an evening.
I was going to say.
I just got it, so I haven't read it yet.
Okay, well, this isn't going to be a big spoiler, don't worry.
It better not.
But, of course, the conceit of the book is that he writes a memoir, but basically about 1 year in his life, 1967. And he writes very compellingly about that year, and it's very humorous and at times moving, but it is very light. I mean, it's a very quick read, breezy read, I'd say. But there's one thing he says in that book. That
about Brian Eno?
No. Yeah, there's Eno stories, but no, there's one thing he contends in that book that has really stuck in my head. Just because I found it to be fascinating, and it's basically that in Robin Hitchcock's view, 1967 was the greatest year in popular music. That year, anything went. Like, you didn't know what an artist was going to put out. Their next record could be so experimental, go off into such weird directions, the productions and the psychedelic aspects of things, whatever. And of course, his hero is Dylan. And, he kind of epitomizes Dylan with those 3 great albums of that era, Bringing It On Home, Highway 61 Revisited, and then Blonde on Blonde. And then he says, so what he talks about, well, where is Dylan? No one knows where Dylan is. They say maybe he was in a motorcycle accident, et cetera, et cetera. And then he says, and then John Wesley Harding came out, and I bought it the day it came out. And he says, I played it. And he says, it's a good record, but it wasn't the same. And nothing else was ever the same in music. He said, all of a sudden, it was country rock, and everybody was playing simply, and with and mellow music, and that adventure was gone, and we never regained it. That has really stuck in my head. Like, I don't even know if I totally agree with it. For one thing, I love John Wesley Harding. It's one of my favorite Dylan albums.
Yeah, me too.
But it's just that I find that to be a fascinating thought because it's kind of true. I mean, it is true that was the year of like Jimi Hendrix, and the Beatles going from 4 guys playing guitars to suddenly Sgt. Pepper and Magical Mystery Tour. I'm just wondering how that hit you, Ron. That's a long preamble. I apologize, but it's been really on my mind ever since I read it.
Yeah, Nick?
No, I was going to say, great point, Bob.
Yeah. I sort of agree with him, but if I may take it back a notch and lay praise where it's due, I think it's all because of one record that was made, I believe, before then. I think it was 1966. That's Pet Sounds.
Okay.
And I'm not going to say Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. I'm going to say Pet Sounds by Brian Wilson.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
He opened up the doors to everything from new types of arrangements, new orchestrations. Mm-hmm. I mean, who else would have bicycle bells and dogs barking on a pop record?
Right.
Even the Mothers, as experimental as they were, I don't think they were quite as creative in the studio as Brian Wilson had been. So the Beatles acknowledge that Pet Sounds was an influence on Sgt. Pepper.
Right.
In many ways, the Stones' Satanic Majesty's Request was their version of Sgt. Pepper.
Yeah.
Something was kicked loose. I think that was the year of Bonzo's Gorilla album. Mm-hmm. And, to a lesser extent, even though probably a larger significant one, it was the year of the Buffalo Springfield's debut.
Okay, yeah.
I was in L.A. the summer of 1967, and I'm not as cool and trendy as that sounds. I was stuck in my uncle's apartment in Sherman Oaks in the Valley. But he said I should go see something at the Hollywood Bowl, and at the time I would never think of anything as boring as a classical music concert. But on the pop schedule were the Mamas and the Papas and Simon and Garfunkel, two different shows. Uh-huh. So I opted for Simon and Garfunkel. Mm-hmm. Still, I mean, my first real big concert that I ever attended, and still one of the, defining musical moments of my life. Yeah. They were so in voice. They were so sharp, so witty. Uh-huh. But had I chosen to see the Mamas and the Papas, the opening act for them was Jimi Hendrix.
Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. I think that's when he made his, big debut.
Yeah, yeah.
So as sad I am to have missed the Mamas and the Papas, I'm kicking myself for missing early Hendrix.
Yeah, right.
Man, oh, man.
Okay, I just had to ask you that question. I knew you'd have a thoughtful answer to it. It's really stuck in my head. I'm sure other people, it's a very generational thing, and I'm actually a little young for this. I would have been only 10 in that year. But I mean, I was already listening to music, though, and I guarantee there's people who would say the same thing about 1977 when all the punk bands kind of broke, right?
Well,
good point.
Music's never been the same since, that year, the Pistols and the Clash,
To be
etc.
quite honest, the Sex Pistols, people always say, what's the record that changed your life? Well, unfortunately, nothing really changes my life. But for good or for bad, I don't know. Maybe I should consider change. No, never mind. That's for the therapist, not for you. But
Our fees are quite reasonable, Ron.
oh, okay. In the winter,
half of his. That's half it.
in the winter of '78, I was working at the B. Dalton store at Rolling Acres Mall, and by the time I had closed up the store and done all the paperwork and all that, it was like 10 o'clock, and it was a blizzard outside, and I couldn't make it to Cleveland to see my girlfriend. Maybe I shouldn't say that with my wife sitting here, but she doesn't know that there were others before her.
I see. It'll be our little secret.
Yeah, but
The other
I
80.
left the store. It was maybe like 10:30 in a blizzard, and I knew that I wasn't going to see her that weekend, and I had WMMS on, and whoever the disc jockey was at the time said, "We just got the new Sex Pistols single, Anarchy in the UK," and from that first jarring note,
Yeah.
and
That song does begin with a bang, doesn't it?
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now I've blanked on the lyrics. Yeah, I can't remember the lyrics. Anyway, I listened to that and I said, "There are others like me," and it was such just a burst of energy. I thought, man, I love these guys. I had tickets to see the Sex Pistols at the Agora.
Me
Yeah.
too.
And the show that was canceled
Yeah,
because
when
they weren't allowed to.
Pirubu was on that bill
Oh
with
man! See, I'd never seen Pure Ubu live, even though I knew Pete Laffner a little bit.
him. Yeah. Yeah, Bizarros used to play with them at Pirates Cove, Thursdays for quite a while. But yeah, I had those tickets too,
Yeah.
I think I saw Gong at Pirates Cove, and that talk about a band unlike any you've ever seen before, when you didn't know what you were getting.
Right.
Wait, for the uninitiated, I should say that Gong starts off as a jazz trio, and then more and more musicians join them, and it was sort of a jazz fusion. And then in the middle of it, David Allen breaks into almost nonsense poetry, like "Now We Are Six." And then it turns into a complete psychedelic show, and then it ends up being jazz again.
So you got a lot of different genres for your money with that show. So when I worked at the library, one of my tasks was to bring in prominent authors, to speak at our main event speaker series. And one of the earliest couple that I brought in were Jane and Michael Stern.
Oh, yeah.
Who, of course, were very well known for their road food books.
Oh, yeah.
And where they travel all around the country and go to these diners and what have you. Kind of ahead of their time. A lot of the
Really?
Food Network programming, a lot of different writers, for that matter, kind of copy their style. Well, one of the things that they wanted to talk about, and one of the specific places they wanted to visit when they were here, were the Barberton chicken restaurants.
Really?
Which, kind of surprised me a little bit, not being very bright, I guess, or not know. But I was like, really? Well, all right. And then I mentioned it to my wife, and she's like, oh, yeah, that's a really unique recipe to this area.
Absolutely.
And so what do you know, but some years later, Ron Koltnow, our guest, writes a book called Barberton Fried Chicken, an Ohio Original. And this book is extremely entertaining and quite informative. I really loved it, and I highly recommend it. But I want to talk to you now, Ron, about the writing of the book. Now, how'd you get the idea for doing this?
Wait, before we go any further, I have to ask Nick, are you a fan of Barberton Chicken?
Yeah.
What was your favorite?
What's the one that for a while they had two locations, but it was the most famous one.
Oh, Belgrade Gardens.
Yeah, so Belgrade, just a regular breast, but for us Greeks, it's funny that you call something hot rice, hot sauce, you know? But I love that chicken, put the hot sauce on it.
Believe it or not, the hot sauce is based not on an Eastern European recipe, but in fact a Turkish one.
No.
Yeah, because of, I don't really know what to call them. I'm going to call them Mongol hordes, but they weren't Mongol hordes. The invaders who sort of ransacked Eastern Europe, I believe in the 15th or 16th century, they brought a lot of their spices with them. So there's a dish called juvice, which is a stew of tomatoes, peppers, rice, sometimes with meat in it. And that was actually the origin of the Barberton hot rice.
Really?
Yeah. Which you can read about in my book. By the way, before we continue, I have to do a trigger warning and let people know that the following will be discussion of foods of great nutritional irresponsibility.
So we don't hold us accountable for whatever
the genesis,
dietary problems you have.
The genesis of the book is actually an article that appeared in the Akron Beacon Journal when I was still living here, which means prior to 1982. I think it was just a filler. I think they needed like a column inch. And somebody just decided to write, you know, there are 5 chicken restaurants in town. The original Belgrade Gardens started in 1933, and then it was followed by the White House and Hoppekin and Village Inn.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And I thought, you know, that's interesting. You never really think of the history of these places because we were huge devotees. I mean, we were at one or the other like every weekend.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, we'd go to the beach in the summer and then go home and clean up and immediately go to Millich's Village Inn, which, by the way, is where I dined last night. I needed to check the old place out again. But that article sort of stuck in my head that they talked a little bit about the original Serbo-Croatian background,
the
unusual nature of the foods. And by doing some research, I found that basically the type of food you can get at the Barberton chicken houses is available only at the Barberton chicken houses and some places in the former Yugoslavia.
Wow.
Yeah. I've even talked to other food writers who write about Eastern European food and say, do you know of this dish? Have you ever seen it served anywhere else? I say, no. So it's purely unique to this area.
Yeah.
And as a amateur glutton, I'm not quite a professional yet, but I'm working on it.
There's always time. You have to have goals.
There's always time.
Yeah. I'm drawn to food, particularly regional foods. Whenever I go somewhere, I investigate, you know, what is the local thing that everybody talks about, where everybody says to eat. I posted this morning on Facebook that I was going to be in Akron, and almost immediately the first response is, going to Swenson's? ? And I regret to tell the person who wrote the question that no, I'm not going to Swenson's, but I believe we are headed to Skyway after this. So anyway, but this idea of Barberton Fried Chicken just stuck with me. I've been fascinated by it. So once upon a time, I was, again, just toying around on Facebook, which was what I do instead of serious work. And there was an ad, or not even an ad, it was just really a mention from this publisher. They call themselves, and I wish I knew this. Yeah, Acadia Press.
Oh, yeah.
And you might know their books. A lot of them are those little sepia-colored books that talk about neighborhoods or cities, like, you know, inside Portage Lakes and things like that. Well, they were developing this new line on food books. They said, we're looking for books about certain foods. So I didn't even hesitate. I just sent in a 3-word query, Barberton Fried Chicken. And within the hour, I got a response, tell me more.
Okay.
And I said, well, at one time, there were 5 Serbian, actually, this is even before I found out the Hungarian one, there were 5 Serbian restaurants within a 2-mile radius that all served exactly the same thing. one meal only.
Yeah.
Fried chicken, hot sauce, coleslaw, and some of the world's finest French fries.
Yeah.
It was after I started doing the research that I found that there was a 6th restaurant, a Hungarian restaurant called Mako's.
No.
And I had heard people talk about Mako's. I had no idea what it was. So that was my big breakthrough in the book of getting to finally name the 6th unsung Barberton Fried Chicken restaurant. So it was an unusual situation. I don't know if you want me to talk mechanics. The guy who sent me the response immediately said, "We want it."
Okay.
I signed the contract.
Easiest pitch ever.
Yeah, it really was. I signed the contract in August, I think, of 2017, and I had to deliver the book in March of 2018.
Okay, pretty quick turnover.
Yeah, which only gave me a few months to do all the research and to actually sit down to write the thing.
And there's a lot of photos. Did you have to do the research on those yourself or take them, or how'd that work?
The historical photos came either from Akron Memories through the library or the Beacon Journal photo morgue.
Yeah, okay.
Which I regret the passing of the Beacon Journal so much.
Yeah.
I know they're still around, but I mean,
Not the
I
same.
missed being able to go to the building and checking out the morgue, as we call it, to look up old things.
Did they charge for that?
Yes, a lot. When I told them I was just a poor scholar, they gave me a break. So
No kidding.
for that, I'm truly grateful. But of course, the photo editor of the book, as you may well know, is the great James Carney, who I mentioned earlier. He took all of the photos of the current photos of the local people.
Man.
That's just so up Jim's alley. I can't help but laugh.
Yeah, the truth of the matter is, the Akron diaspora, or the people who are still in Akron, we're a very tight knit group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's amazing how we've all hung together these centuries.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. So again, it was funny. So to backtrack a bit here, it was interesting to me that these nationally known writers would come in, and that was absolute, that was at the top of their list. They wanted to visit Barberton. And, I don't think I should, the first time I ever had Barberton chicken, my wife was a huge fan of it. And I didn't grow up in Akron, so it was all new to me. We went to Belgrade's, and I think I was at first mainly struck by just the interesting building. I mean, it's kind of like, seems like one room added on to another room. It's almost like a maze. It's a very little, all these little dining areas and stuff. Yeah.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay. No wonder it seems that way.
It had been a farmhouse.
Okay.
Just a family farm.
Uh-huh.
When they came to this country, I should know the date, but I can't remember, late 19th, early 20th century, man known as Mike Topolsky and his wife Smilka bought that farm there.
Okay.
At the time, it was out in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
In the 30s, when times got hard and the Topolsky's dairy farm was not doing as well, they sold the building to, I said Mike and Smilka, but no, those are the founders of Belgrade Gardens. Their parents who bought the farm, sold it to Mike and Smilka, and they decided to open a little restaurant. At the time, they decided to open a little restaurant that was just going to serve things like soup and sandwiches, a businessman's lunch type of thing.
Right.
But one day, Smilka was in the back room cooking her family's dinner, and it was the hot sauce, or the ceviche, that did it. The seductive smells drifted out into the dining room, and everybody said, "I want that." So gone were the soup and sandwiches. In came the hot sauce, the traditional Serbian cabbage slaw, fried potatoes, and, of course, the world-famous chicken.
Right.
So that was founded in 1933. So I hope I'm around in 9 years to come back and celebrate their 100th anniversary.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Little business nearby in Barberton, the Coffee Pot, which is just a greasy spoon. They've been there for 100 years. New owners, of course, but 100 years is a long life for restaurants, which seem to have very limited lifespans.
Yeah. And for all those different places, all to exist in that one town, it's just kind of an amazing thing.
They were so busy in the 50s and 60s that people would drive around in circles trying to find out which chicken house had the smallest line.
Wow.
It's funny, we went to Village Inn last night, and there was a line when we got there.
Oh.
And I was there with my buddy Carl, and he said, "Hey, it's just like the old days when you have to wait in line to get your chicken." But that's what I said. It's really a novelty, and I think Barberton chicken should be in tourist guides as one of the things you must do when you're in this area.
Yeah.
You know, Stan Hewitt.
Their chicken doesn't compare.
Derby Downs.
Yeah, well, yeah, Derby Downs, which looks a little bit like our back garden when we started digging it up.
Now, I do feel like I need to just put on the record that, like all things Akron, that have their very stout devotees, there's always naysayers. And I've found interesting that it seems to me like there's maybe a 2 out of 3 ratio of people who love Barberton chicken, but those other people really don't like it. It is a very particular kind of thing. It's very fatty compared to a lot of fried chicken. Would that be the right way to describe it?
That's the general assumption. It's chicken fried in lard.
Yeah.
That's actually the secret of the recipe, the frying in lard. Gives it a much crispier crunch, retains the juices. Somewhere along the line, lard got a bad rap.
Yeah.
Of course, I'm Jewish. I'm not supposed to eat lard because it's unkosher.
Right.
So I have a special dispensation from God to eat Barberton chicken. But, no, it conveys a sense that it's fatty. And because it seals in juices, when you bite into like a fresh, hot Barberton chicken breast, let's say, you get that spurt of hot liquid, which everybody assumes is grease. It's not. It's actually moist chicken cooked the way it should be. Again, further research into it told me that lard is actually one of the healthiest cooking fats you can use because A, it's natural, and B, it has a higher heating point.
Yeah.
So you can get it really hot. So when you drop the chicken in, it immediately seals and prevents fat from getting in. But of course, there are the French fries and anything breaded and fried and big mound of fried potatoes. This is not for the diet conscious.
Right.
You can kid yourself in saying that the cabbage slaw and rice and tomatoes and peppers is...
You're getting your vegetables for the day.
It's a good one for vegetarians. I don't think they use chicken stock in the making of the rice, so it might even be vegan friendly.
Yeah, okay.
They cut corners by using good old cheap water. I don't know if that's true. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to besmirch the noble name of Barberton chicken houses.
Well, anyway, it's a funny thing because when you mention the existence of this book, people will sometimes go like, really? But I guarantee you, anyone who's read the book loves it. I mean, it's very informative about the cultural history of the ethnic history that's behind this food. And, you know, food is such a great representation of culture, isn't it? I mean, it's, you know, to know a country or a nation or a culture's cuisine is to really get a lot of insight into what they value, I think. And so this is it's just a fascinating book, and makes you hungry. I'm getting hungry now just looking at it.
I can describe the chicken I ate last night. The golden breading. All right. Slightly salty.
Stop it, Ron.
Tingle on the back of the tongue.
Oh, the way you talk.
Vinegar.
Well, we're running out of time, and so I do want to ask you about what potential, if you're willing to speak to such a thing, what potential writing project or projects you may have in store for the future.
I cannot answer that one, and I'll tell you why. I have been referring to something called The Book That Shall Not Be Written, which I've been working on for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
I recently gave up hope, and I was ready to burn all my notes and tear apart my office and go enter a monastery. But I think being back here, eating the chicken and thinking back to my happy days as a poor scholar in Akron, Ohio, I think I'm going to get back to it in the fall. I've been doing tons of research. I found that I'm not a writer. People go on Jeopardy. Almost, if you watch Jeopardy regularly, you'll find like 80% of the contestants identify themselves as a writer on the show.
Okay.
I wouldn't do that. I'm not a writer. What I am is a researcher. I do tons of research. I love doing research. I am happier in a library than just about anywhere else on earth. But I have to tell you, there's a publishing line called Object Lessons.
Okay.
They're very short books, about 100 pages, and each deals with like one physical object or one general concept. They do one on, it's like the hamburger.
Yeah.
I was turned on to this line when a woman I know wrote a book on high-heeled shoes. It's called High Heels. I actually contributed to her, not GoFundMe, what's the Patreon?
Oh, Patreon?
Patreon. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Yeah.
I donated to her, so I got a free copy of High Heels for it, which I haven't read. Oh, well, silly me. But anyway, they were doing this object lessons. And again, they had a call out for topics. And I didn't even hesitate. It just came into my mind like the proverbial lightning bolt. The thermos bottle. We all use the thermos bottle. Where does it come from?
Yeah, right.
Who created the thermos bottle? Now, I'm taking a little bit of liberty with my approach to the book, because I say it basically starts in the book of Genesis, when Moses writes that all was null and void. So whether God actually created the thermos bottle, I can't say. But being an atheist, I doubt it. But I follow the idea of the void, the philosophical concept of the void, up through Aristotle, who we all know was sort of anti-void, and then into Renaissance scientists experimenting with what would become the first man-made vacuum. Man named Evangelista, I'm about to say Botticelli. It's not his name. Torricelli. Thank you. Evangelista Torricelli created the first man-made vacuum and invented the barometer. Well, when other scientists all throughout Europe realized you could empty a vessel of air, they started doing all kinds of really weird experiments, which eventually segued into one scientist in Victorian England, Sir James Dewar, who realized that if you emptied all the air out of one chamber and put an inner chamber in there, you could put coffee in there and it would stay warm.
Okay.
And the world as we know it changed.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's what I'm working on.
Okay.
I'm always working on my classic McCarthy-era novel. I said every English major everywhere has got the great American novel in him.
Right.
Mine has to do with Washington, D.C. during the Red Scare.
Okay.
James Ellroy wrote a book called L.A., that wasn't L.A. Confidential, it was The Big Nowhere. The novel I wanted to write was The Big Nowhere, only set in Washington, D.C. and not in L.A.
Okay.
I told Ellroy that. He got a laugh out of it.
We should get on that. It would be a timely topic.
Yeah.
I thought so, because a lot of it involves the Lavender Scare.
Yes, right.
The persecution of gays in government buildings, government offices,
right,
which was pure fabrication. By the way, talk about politics, which I don't want to do. I'm not going to talk about politics or religion. But let's say 70 years ago, Republicans were, oh my God, you've read Karl Marx, you're a communist. These days, many Republicans are like, I prefer Russia to America.
Yeah.
How did they get that way in 70 years?
Well, that's something to ponder for listeners to ponder. And on that note, I am going to have to bring this to a halt. It's been fun. I have a feeling that we could talk for another 2 hours.
Multi-part series on this.
Yeah, yeah. But we are out of time. So anyway, I would like to thank very much Ronald Koltnow. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Ron. It's so great seeing you again.
Nick and Bob, it's great. Thank you very much for having me. And listeners out there in podcast land.
Well, good.
Thank you for listening.
And this has been From Akron and Beyond. With Nick Nicholas, I'm Bob Ethington. See you next time.
Bye-bye.